Yoga.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. And we'd like to thank you all for tuning in. Today on The Voice of Yoga, we will talk about fairness in the context of karmic or material law being the perfect accountant and spiritual law, which is the perfection of being. Listen as we discuss the allness of the omnipresent divine principle concealed in the operations of the mental material illusion. In this podcast, we will explore the benefits of knowing the truth, which liberates the false from the real. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and accept absolute good. So the title of today's podcast is Spiritual Life Isn't Fair. Tell us, what was your inspiration for this title?
Yeah, I think we were talking about the statement we often hear. Life isn't fair, to cover what doesn't make sense, especially if God is all and all is good. What is injustice, sickness, misfortune, accidents, disaster? To help us understand the complexity of the situation, we break it down into the false and the real. All the good, beautiful, and true attributes belong to the divine. And anything that doesn't have divine qualities isn't here. And to substantiate that, we have this from John 1:1-4, and I'll read it. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by Him. And without Him was not anything made that was made. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. End of quote. Here we're going to remind ourselves the Transfiguration doesn't appear in the book of John, only in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The reason is the book of John begins with the Transfiguration, which means we're in a higher level of consciousness to comprehend this instruction.
So my curiosity I have about the verse that you just read from John 1:1-4, and in it you're saying all things are made by Him. I know a lot of people believe God made man, so therefore God made us, so all things were made by Him. So how do we realize God didn't really make man human?
God made man in God's image and likeness, which means God made the spiritual universe. When you're reading the Bible, the divine creation is Genesis 1. God makes everything, man, woman, all the creatures of the world, and everything is very good. When you get to Genesis 2, there's a mist that comes over the earth, and then there's this secondary creation. The Lord God makes Adam out of the clay of the earth and Eve out of the rib of Adam. This is an important thing to start to understand. This is the false creation. This is the mental material illusion. God can't make anything that dies. And so once we learn how to separate the unreal from the real, the mental material from the spiritual, then we've got a chance of building a mental landscape that will support the divine principle. Otherwise, you fall back into what Mary Baker Eddy calls pantheism, where you believe God makes everything. God made sickness, suffering, disease, lack, limitation. God rewards and punishes. And you can believe this for sure. You can believe anything, but you can't demonstrate divine law with scientific certainty without the principle. And if you have a contradiction and you don't know God aright, then of course you forfeit your ability to experience the divine creation. And what we want to focus on here is the how to induce the God experience. How can we call the divine creation into the mental material experience? In order to do this, you have to understand something. Understand how creation is taking place. How you can have a perfect spiritual universe concealed by a mental material veil under a completely different government. The Omnipresent Divine Principle is perfect, whole, complete, and it's the only thing that's here. Once you are willing to challenge your concept of it, your belief system, then you've got the opportunity to initiate this developmental process.
So I want to ask you about the Transfiguration. You said the book of John begins with Transfiguration, which means we're at a higher level of consciousness to be able to comprehend the instruction. Well, what is the instruction?
Well, the instruction is know the truth and it will make you free. In order for us to know this truth, we have to initiate a developmental process. Understand that the mind we're using to get us through this lifetime is not the divine creation, is not capable of receiving divine inspiration, and so depart from our natural state and learn how to think differently. Learn how to stop thinking with 5 corporeal senses and activate 7 spiritual senses. And so the Transfiguration is a metaphor or a symbolic story about how we graduate from thinking with 5 corporeal senses to knowing with 7 spiritual senses. And however you want to unbox that, metaphorically, symbolically, the concept is Jesus takes James, Peter, and John to the mountaintop where Moses and Elijah appear. Now, this might seem like an external story and an event that might have happened 2,000 years ago, but it's really a diagram for the inner process of what happens as we shift consciousness from what we call in yoga Muladhara chakra to Ajna chakra. It is the journey of going from sense to soul. And to find any degree of success with initiating this process, you really want to practice a tried and true divine metaphysical system that employs strategies so you can learn how to control how you think and eventually stop thinking and become conscious of the divine creation, and then let divine mind reveal itself to you from within. And there are a lot of things that we could be doing to induce this.
So may give us some ideas of what we can be doing to do just that.
I really like to go with the idea of born again of spirit, this idea of rebirthing the physical body in the invisible, intangible, divine omnipresence as your starting point, your initiation. Mortal mind must go through 3 stages of growth before we can walk reason through the open door of revelation. And the entire mental material world of energy isn't real because it wasn't made by him. It is a reflection, an illusion, a concept about the divine creation, and is driven by belief. Spirit is the only self-existent power, and Everything else only seems to appear to have power because of belief, which is a hypnotic state. The mental material illusion runs on a belief in two powers, which we call the law of karma or material law. Mental material is duality or double, and spirit is single or one.
Swami, in the summary, we said we were going to discuss the allness of the Omnipresent Divine Principle concealed in the operations of the mental material illusion. Let's pick that apart a little bit more. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, what we're looking at here, the entire mental material world of energy is under karmic law, material law. Karmic law is the perfect accountant. It's the law of reciprocity. For every action, there is an equal and an opposite reaction. Whatever we put out is what we get back. That's why we say there are no accidents. Everything has cause and effect. But karmic law is really driven by the love of God. It is the divine principle not letting us accept anything less than the truth of our being. We are the image and likeness of the divine. We should live and move and have our being under the government of divine law, which, as we said in the opening, isn't fair. Spirit isn't fair. Spirit is the perfection of being. There isn't good and bad in spiritual perception. There is only absolute goodness. There isn't good health and bad health. It's just perfect health. Get away from evaluating everything from mortal sense perception. And we begin to develop the faculty too pure to behold iniquity. The mind of Christ, which sees the divine creation. But in order to avoid the contradiction, learn how to separate the unreal from the real, and then tell the truth about the truth and tell the truth about the lie. Don't try and fix anything on a mental material level. What you're really trying to do is come out of the belief you're something less than the perfection of being. Learn how to meet challenges spiritually without trying, striving, struggling, seeking, planning, or even asking. Become a faithful witness to the perfection of being. As your identity shifts from a mental material basis to a spiritual basis, you lose the urgency that happens at mortal sense of existence. There are no needs in spirit. There is no fear in spirit. Nothing but the good, beautiful, and true attributes without any opposition. So we don't try, we rest in the knowledge of one being. There isn't God and all of us. There's only one life here, and it is held, controlled, and governed by the divine law of eternal life, everywhere, always.
We're going to pause right here to hear a word from our sponsor. Listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Institute for Personal Development Incorporated is a Kriya Yoga ashram offering yoga classes in all 8 stages of Kriya Yoga, including classes, personal training, teacher training, residential program, online live classes, and online products for self-discovery and transformation. Discover, learn, and practice one of the oldest and purest forms of yoga, Kriya Yoga, by uniting ancient religion with modern science. Visit www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste. Welcome back. For those who are just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So let's discuss a Bible verse that we have in our notes. This is from James 1, verse 7 and 8. I'll read it. For let not that man think that he shall receive anything of the Lord. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. End of the verses. So let's dive a little bit deeper in what he means by a double-minded man.
Yeah, for me, it means that you're still working with the mortal mind. You're still looking at duality or the mental material concept. I also like what Matthew 6:22, Jesus says, the light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. End of quote. This idea of making your mind or your eye single as opposed to being double-minded is a way of talking about graduating from thinking with 5 corporeal senses to knowing with 7 spiritual senses. Mental material works in contrast. Nothing is whole at this mental material level. Everything is in half, which gives a point of departure, and our senses pick up what's before them. We experience this waking state, dream state, and then dreamless state. We have recollection from our experience with the waking state because it's dualistic. We have recollection from the dream state. We remember our dreams because they're dualistic. But when consciousness leaves the astral mental body and goes into the causal spiritual body, that's the sleep from which we return when we have no recollection. And the reason we have no recollection is because consciousness has returned to the unified state. Spirit is whole, it's complete, there's no contrast. So this is what is meant by make thine eye single, to perceive the spiritual fact of being. Get out of the mental material illusion. Know the truth, and then it makes us free from the belief in duality.
So in James 1, verse 8, when he says a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, is man unstable because he doesn't have this consciousness to be able to receive the divine?
Well, first of all, we're unstable because we're in a false sense of existence. It's not made by God. It's not real. We're in the wrong self. And also, you're the branch cut off from the vine, so you're withering. And this was what they called sin. You're out of divine consciousness. And as long as we continue to believe we are a finite, separate, mortal being, we're in this cycle of death and rebirth. This will go on indefinitely until we know the truth that liberates us from the law of karma, the belief in 2 powers. And it is the knowing of the divine principle that dissolves the false sense of existence. Just like light dispels darkness, truth dispels the error. Darkness isn't an opposing power to light, it's the absence of light. Error is not an opposing power to truth, it's the absence of truth.
Swami, if somebody said to you, well, life isn't fair, how would you respond to that spiritually?
Well, mental material can be fair or unfair, just or unjust, good or bad, right or wrong, because of the nature of the beast, which is dualistic and driven by belief. To drill down with karmic law, we learn that karmic law, which is the perfect accountant measuring actions, everything seems to have cause with an effect. What may seem to be unjust may be the result of karma, which is in time and may be retribution from a past incident. This negates the concept of an accident and gives reason for the appearance, but it's not liberation from material law. As we go deeper with the law of karma, we see it's the love of God, not letting anyone accept the false sense of existence by guiding all into the light of truth. All right? So we have problems primarily because we are out of divine consciousness, because we don't know the truth. A problem is evidence of your ignorance of a spiritual law, evidence of ignorance. A problem is a signal you are in violation of spiritual law. It's a signal, a sign. A problem is a demand that you make your adjustment to repair this violation. Call to correct the violation. You do not try to repair the violation by human means, but seek the Father within. Never go to God to solve the problem. You go to God to reveal the truth, because only Spirit is, and divine law only functions in spiritual life.
Swami, if somebody had a problem, you're saying they should seek the Father within. It sounds like that should and could be easy, but truthfully, that may be difficult for some of us. We may think that we're seeking the Father within, but we just don't go deep enough. So what are your thoughts here?
Well, you're exactly right here. We have to develop the faculty that enables us to perceive the divine creation. This is a process we initiate. Enlist strategies. You can attune the mind-body complex to the divine idea, what Mary Baker Eddy calls educating thought up to spiritual apprehension. And it all begins with a tried and true divine metaphysical system. I like the Kriya Yoga because we enlist strategies like skillful use of thought, skillful use of breath, skillful use of water, skillful use of food, skillful use of exercise, which creates your path of action, things that you can and you must do. If you don't rebirth your physical body in the invisible, intangible omnipresence, then you will never have attention for the invisible, intangible omnipresence. Once you have trained the body to look for the invisible, intangible spirit, this is what the Bible calls love God. When God becomes your symbol for validation. And what's really helpful with systems like yoga is they break it down scientifically to think right, how we think. Understand there are modes of thinking. Mortal mind has to go through 3 stages of development. We have to master the idea of animal magnetism, fear, preservation, survival. Fear is a defense mechanism for the false sense of self. And if you don't rebirth your body in a different source of sustenance and you haven't changed the reward circuits in your brain, your unconscious patterns will continue to run the show. But once you have overcome animal magnetism, you still have to develop human intelligence, learning how to make conscious decisions using your mental functions, perception, reason, memory, intuition. And then the final stage of this whole thing is what Jesus called the son of perdition, which is corporeal sense functioning in human consciousness. Overcome this world. Then you can walk reason through the open door of revelation. But if you're not employing these strategies and you're left to your own devices and you think you can do this with the mind that can't bring forth the divine image, then like Jesus said, you will die in your sin.
So you're saying that spiritual life isn't fair in the sense that fair can become unfair. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, spirit has no opposition and is entirely perfect. The Sanskrit term purna translates to mean perfect. but means whole or complete. Spirit is omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, without opposition. And to help us understand the how to call spirit into expression, we have this from Joel Goldsmith, A Parenthesis in Eternity.
And I'll read it. To understand this makes it clear that in our spiritual identity, all that God is, we are. There is no need, therefore, to turn to God for something. There is the need only to recognize this relationship of oneness, and then create within ourselves a vacuum so that we can realize my being is constituted of the quality, the substance, and the essence of God, and it is the law of God that governs, guides, directs, and instructs me. The nature of our being is the same as the nature of God being, for we are one. Relaxing in that oneness, we permit the invisible to govern, uphold, sustain, move, feed, clothe, house, direct, and instruct us. This is different from thinking of ourselves as something separate and apart from God, having to ask God or attempting to influence Him. This is the difference between successful spiritual living and unsuccessful living of any type. God's grace governs us. God's grace is our sufficiency, but that grace is not brought into our experience by praying to God in the sense of asking, pleading, or seeking for it. Rather, does it come by relaxing into an atmosphere of receptivity. At this moment, let us turn from the human picture which is presenting itself to us and realize that we live and move and have our being in God. Wherever we are, let us relax in the invisible. We cannot see, hear, taste, touch, or smell it, but through faith, through an inner conviction, we can understand that the place whereon we stand is holy ground. That where the I of us is, God is, that the kingdom of God is within us, right where we are, and then feeling that, relax. End of the passage. Swami, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that initially you start out with a belief in the divine creation, because we don't have the faculty that enables us to perceive it. Consciousness is experience, but our belief in the divine creation, and provided that we are a faithful witness, our belief will graduate to faith, where we will begin to see the effect of conscious awareness of divine truth in our experiences, until eventually your belief, which then became faith, will then become understanding, where you are able to demonstrate divine law with scientific certainty.
Swami, what would our lives look like if we know the truth which liberates the false from the real?
Well, then you would walk in the kingdom of heaven on earth, live under the protection of divine law. No longer be influenced by the mental material concept. Be free from all of the problems and contradictions and everything that goes along with this belief in two powers. Experience the peace, love, joy, goodness, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, patience of perfect life. Out of time and space, beyond form and concept, matter and belief, no longer forming thoughts and opinions based on information coming through duality, and abide in the peace that passes understanding.
Swami, thank you for your insights for today's podcast titled, Spiritual Life Isn't Fair. Listeners, be sure to visit the website www.ipdtransform.com. On any of the pages as you scroll down, you'll see several buttons there that you could press that would further your understanding. Swami, any final thoughts about today's program?
Well, I would like to encourage people to join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and accept absolute goodness. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga realization. Namaste.